Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, guys, we have some developing news from Gaza, from the Middle East. It does look like at least 6 people have been killed as Israeli troops open fire. Now, I'm going to be talking about that now, and then we're going to talk over about something that happened yesterday. This is from BBC Verify. They're saying that there were executions in Gaza, and I will come onto that in a moment, but we have actually got live updates at the moment, guys. So from 2 minutes ago, we have got the lessons Trump may have learned from the Gaza deal. We've also got eyewitnesses. West Bank prisoner release exposes deeper wounds. And we have got what we all need to know, calls for the southern crossing to be open to let out thousands of aid trucks, to let in thousands of aid trucks into Gaza. But the breaking news at the moment, guys, it does look like the Israeli forces have opened fire, on. It's very difficult at this time to understand who they've opened fire on. But Israeli troops opening fire in Gaza demonstrates how fragile the ceasefire is. And look, guys, to be quite clear, if people are shooting in Gaza right now, by people shooting in Gaza, I mean if there's skirmishes between the Israeli military and the Gazans or Palestinians, it's quite clear that the ceasefire is over. Now, look, guys, that's me speculating and giving you guys my own opinion. I don't know what it would mean. I don't know where, as far as I'm concerned, a ceasefire is when you stop. Kind of, the clue's in the name, ceasefire. If those ceasefires continue and people keep shooting, and I remember this when I was in Ukraine, the Minsk and Minsk II agreements never really held. They were just called ceasefires, but they were ceasefires in name only because those people were still firing at each other. So it does look like the Israeli military have opened fire, killing 6. Now, I just want to skip back to last night. So this is from something called BBC Verify. So what they do is they try to get open source images, open source footage, and they try and verify it. So BBC Verify has authenticated graphic videos that show public executions carried out last night by Hamas in Gaza City. So remember how we talked yesterday about the 26 or 27 people, 27 it was, at least 27 people last night in Gaza were killed. Turns out from the BBC, this is what I'm getting, guys, BBC Verify has authenticated graphic videos that show public executions carried out by Hamas. Now, I don't know if that's the full 27, but it does look like things are chaos, things are carnage in Gaza City right now. I'm going to speculate right now that there's going to have to be some sort of international peacekeeping force in there. And then the Palestinians, the Gazans, Hamas, they're just going to be fighting with them. So I don't think we've seen the last of this, guys. I really don't. And what people need to understand is the whole dynamics and the whole cultural dynamic in the Middle East is, for example, if the person who negotiated for this ceasefire is not part of, is from a different tribe, you wouldn't respect that. You would say, right, okay, well, he's not my tribe. I'm not loyal to him. I'm loyal to this guy. And this guy doesn't want a ceasefire, so we're not going to have a ceasefire. So it's very difficult to put anything in place in the Middle East, guys. Like I always say on my videos, anyone who says that they understand the Middle East, they do not understand the Middle East. Right, so BBC Verify is saying that there were public executions last night in Gaza. The video shows several men with guns line up 8 people whose arms are tied behind their backs. This is from the BBC, guys. With their arms tied behind their backs, they are in a public square. They're in a public square surrounded by a large crowd. While BBC Verify cannot confirm the identity of the masked gunmen, some appear to be wearing the green headbands associated with Hamas. Moments later, the gunmen opened fire, killing all 8. Shouts of Allahu Akbar are heard. For those of you guys who live in the United Kingdom, we're told, aren't we? We're told in the United Kingdom that when people shout Allahu Akbar, it's just a friendly sign. Oh, it means love and peace. Turns out when people shoot each other, they shout Allahu Akbar as well, which means God is the greatest in Arabic. We're choosing not to share the footage. I think that's fair, because the footage is too distressing. Using signs, we could see the videos comparing the street layout with public mapping. We confirmed the video was filmed on a major road in Gaza City. Hamas said in a statement, without providing evidence, that the detainees were criminals and collaborators with Israel. Doesn't make any sense, guys. Doesn't make any sense. It's just chaos, guys. Absolute chaos and carnage out there at the moment. I wouldn't expect this peace deal, this ceasefire, to last much longer. Remember, we've got Friday coming up, and literally all the world leaders have just met. They all had a little swizzle, probably some sandwiches, crafty glass of champagne, a little bit of a talk about what's going to be happening around the world, and then back off home to brief the troops. Internal violence has erupted in Gaza over the last few days, with reports of fighting between Hamas and rival clans in the Strip. Again, guys, I don't know what that means. Rival clans. I would have used gangs, but they're using clans, so whatever. In the latest outbreak of violence over the weekend, dozens were killed as Hamas gunmen clashed with a number of the Dugmush family. So here we have it, guys. I'm reading this for the first time. What do I always tell you guys? You know, very, very tribal, very warlord orientated. So it turns out that this Dugmush family, they must be a big, powerful family, a big clash, you know, a big clan, or I don't know, in Gaza, and they're clashing with the security forces. And as I understand it from this video, the security forces in this context is Hamas, who are, you know, providing security. But guys, look, the breaking news, the reason I'm on this live stream is it does look like the ceasefire. Gaza latest, 6 killed as Israeli troops open fire on suspects after violation of ceasefire agreement. So how many of these violations will there be before people just say, right, okay, the ceasefire is no longer? Israel says its troops have opened fire after suspects approached its troops in Gaza. Meanwhile, Donald Trump says he wants to rebuild the territory, but hasn't committed to a Palestinian state yet. Right, and then we've got from 9 minutes ago, the lessons Trump may have learned from the Gaza deal. Right, okay, yeah. Look, guys, and it just brings everybody, I think it just brings back to the forefront of everybody's mind the fragility of these peace negotiations, the fragility of these ceasefires. I lived through the ones like Minsk and Minsk 2 in Ukraine. They never held. You know, I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I've spent a lot of time, for example, 5 years living in Baghdad. I've lived in Syria. I've spent probably over a year in Afghanistan. Where else have I been in the Middle East? You know, and what I understand is very tribal. People who say they understand the Middle East do not understand the Middle Est. And this is kind of one of the problems. We're trying to put a Western, you know, we're trying to put a Western magnifying glass on these, you know, trying to put a Western magnifying glass on these Middle Eastern problems. And you just can't do that. You can't do that. The same with Ukraine. We're trying to put Western solutions into, you know, Slavic problems, I guess. Anyway, guys, let me get some questions on the chat, and then I will jump, and then we will close this down, guys. I think I'm going to focus more on this later on tonight. Good evening, everyone. The chat's gone wild again. Hello, everybody. Hello. Right, guys, I'm just going to get the last. I'm just going to get a few of these. I'm just going to get a few of these comments. Angela, the Dutch lady, says a ceasefire doesn't mean peace. No, it doesn't. It doesn't, you know, because both sides of when you have a peacefire, when you have a ceasefire, both sides need to honor and respect it. Now, if you've got one side, and I'm talking about the Americans here, one side negotiating for that, you know, and they're negotiating for it, and they say, right, all our guys will abide by these rules, okay? And that's definitive, because that's how the West works. And then if you've got the other side of that rule, that's, you know, maybe one person negotiating a ceasefire terms and conditions, but they don't have the respect of everybody else, it's kind of madness. And this is why it's very democracy is very difficult in the democracy is very difficult in the Middle East. And by democracy, I mean where, like, we listen to our leaders. A lot could be said about that in the United Kingdom. Tim Linsky saying Starmer doing a speech on Sky News. Oh, I must have missed this. Listen, guys, I'm going to focus on the Middle East. Did you see Keir Starmer? Did you guys see Keir Starmer's Donald Trump gaffe yesterday in go on, Donald Trump gaffe where Donald Trump calls him up, and then it's just hilarious, guys. You know, I don't even think we're a real country anymore, guys. I don't. I think we're like some sort of fake country. Right, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to keep this short and sweet. The crux of this is I just wanted to jump on real quick. Does to me look like the Gaza ceasefire is over. Obviously, from these 6 killed, remember there was, I think, 27 last night. So the numbers are topping up. And every time one of these people is killed, they've got friends, they've got family, you get angry about that. So you can see how things are going to escalate. I think this is going to escalate into a bigger regional carnage, and that's going to give the Israelis the green light, or the Israelis, maybe the United States, maybe an international peacekeeping force to go in there and stop these people tearing each other apart, because that's what I think is coming, guys. And we've got to think, people have got to think that right now they're talking about rebuilding Gaza. Like, how are you going to rebuild Gaza when people are still killing each other? Like, how are you going to do that? Like, who are you going to send in there to rebuild that? You've got trucks and tractors. I mean, can you imagine if your clan, I don't like that word, if your family owned some land, and where your houses used to be, there's tractors now redeveloping it into a hotel. You think, hang on a minute, that's where I used to live. I'm not having that. That's my, that little patch is mine. So you can understand the complexities and the granularization of this whole conflict. There's so many different complexities, guys. It's not as simple as putting boots on the ground. Tim Linsky again is saying, sometime you have to do bad things for the greater good, and for me, radicalization is a bad thing. I really hope there is some peace in the Middle East. I just can't see it, guys. I don't see it right now. I think, I think we've been clear. I think it's quite clear. The proof is in the pudding. It doesn't look like the ceasefire is held. It doesn't look like it's held at all. There were masses of people executed last night in Gaza. That's from BBC Verify. So it does look like, this conflict, it does look like this conflict has now gone from, I don't even know what to say, guys. Like, how would you describe it that, so there's a ceasefire. People have said we're going to rebuild it. You've got peace, and people are just killing each other still. It makes no sense. I can't even contemplate it. Anyway, guys, listen, I'm going to be back later on today. I'll be back on at 8. I think I'm going to talk about this more because I've no doubt more of this stuff will come out and there'll be more information released. But listen, guys, I just wanted to jump on and do a quick live stream, and I'll see you guys later.